Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very, very special episode of the Property Podcast, because for the first time ever, this is being done in video.
Yes, welcome. Thank you for joining us on this very special property podcast. I am Rob D, quite literally with Rob B. This is so weird.
Hello.
That's what you look like. I have no idea.
You're actually quite nice.
This is thoroughly bizarre. The first time in hundreds of episodes you've actually recorded it in person. And what a place to be doing
It's
it in.
absolutely incredible. I mean, this place is bonkers.
It is. So for anyone who doesn't know, we are on the 64th floor at Deansgate Square. This is actually in a property that you can access via the Portfolio app. So you can go to portfolio.co.uk to find out more about that. If you want to get on the waiting list, you can do that as well. But we thought, well, we've got a narrow window before the first person moves into this. We need to get in here and do a podcast.
Yeah, any excuse, really. We'll do a podcast from here. That's what we must do, and nobody can move in until we've done it. You have to go to YouTube if you're listening to this, because you would have seen a tour at the beginning if you go to YouTube now. And it is worth going for that, because honestly, I can't get over how incredible this place is. So stop your audio recording if you're doing this via audio. Get over to YouTube. You'll get to see us in action, which is fun. Hello, if you're there now. And watch the tour, because honestly, they don't make apartments like this. This is just beyond like your wildest dreams of what an apartment could be like. It's absolutely incredible. And if you go over to YouTube, which you must absolutely do, make sure you subscribe, because it's going to be the start of more and more content like this. This is the beginning of all those big aspirations we've been talking about.
Yeah, property investment is meant to be exciting. Everyone thinks it's exciting all the time. It's not. But sometimes it really is. And today is one of those days. And this is awesome.
Hey everyone, just a quick note, pausing the podcast right now, because a couple of weeks ago, we let you know in advance that something was happening with the app Portfolio, and the minimum investment amount was changing. Well, I am so pleased that in this special episode, we can announce that the minimum investment amount has halved. It was £10,000, and now you can access Portfolio with an investment of £5,000 or more. For those people who've already been invited onto the app, then congratulations, you can invest now at that minimum amount. And if you're on the waiting list and you've indicated that you can invest at around that level, well, we'll be getting in touch with you soon. We're opening the places up on the waiting list to people who've indicated they have £5,000 or more. And if you're not on the waiting list, or you'd like to find out more about Portfolio and our very exciting app, well, then go to portfolio.co.uk, where you can sign up on the waiting list and find out more information there. Right, back to the penthouse for the rest of the podcast. We want to get into questions, because this is also a Q&A special. And these questions, Rob, aren't from us, or we've made up ourselves. These are questions from people who've interacted with us via social media, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, or beyond. We actually got too many questions, so we're going to edit it down to our favourites. We'll see how many we get through, but there are some crackers in there, and I can't wait to get started. And I think you've got a really strong one to get us going with.
Okay, so here's our first one. This comes in on Instagram from Property Peep, who asks, do you think house prices are overinflated at the moment?
Ooh, I know you're asking the question, but I really actually want to hear your answer. And we've not discussed these answers before we started recording, so I'm curious.
Okay.
What do you think?
I think you can always find individual instances of properties that are overpriced. Although there's interesting, because if someone pays the price, is it actually overpriced? And we can maybe talk about that a bit. But the property market as a whole, I don't believe it is, because I think there are reasons why the property market has been strong. Granted, nobody saw it coming. Everyone got the call completely wrong a year and a half ago when they thought what coronavirus was going to do to the property market. But now there are fundamental reasons why it's performing strongly. When people talk about property being like in a bubble, which is something you hear all the time, the definition of a bubble is something where the market is unsupported by fundamentals. It's just people paying more and more and more because they're scared that the price is going to go up further, or they think someone else will buy it off them for more than that in the future. And we've seen property markets like that before. 2007, like that's really what it was like. But I'm not getting 2007 vibes.
No.
That will come, but I don't think it's there yet.
No, I'm in complete agreement, which is probably no surprise to long-time listeners that we are agreeing again. But I agree, it's not a mania yet. I've got a feeling we'll get there. And at some point, people are just going to view property as some way or some mechanism of making money really, really quickly, which is something we're against and always have been against. It's a long-term investment, but there are going to be people entering the market who will do this to make quick bucks. And some of them will. And, some people will get lucky and get in the start of that mania phase and make really quick money. And great luck to them, and they are lucky. But then there'll be people who'll be burned. But right now, we're not in that phase. It's only just begun. Most people really struggle to deal with a new norm. And we're in a new norm now. The new norm is the hyper-growth phase. But this hasn't happened for a long, long time. This is long actually overdue. London went through a massive spurt in property prices. And it's actually now becoming interesting as a market again, because it's actually been behind in growth terms to inflation, so we're falling in real terms for many years now. So London, the market that was booming, now is starting to look like it's got a bit of value. But overall, yes, I'm sure there are some random areas that are overvalued, but most of the UK and large proportions of the UK, there's still a lot of value in there. I mean, you have to look at the affordability levels of a lot of towns and cities across the UK to show that property prices probably can and ultimately will go higher.
Yeah, you get these narratives in property and people kind of lock onto a way of thinking about the market without really questioning it. And I think one that we're coming into at the moment, I've started hearing more and more, is property is overvalued. People just kind of take it as an article of faith that it is. But when you actually go and look at some of that data, like different affordability measures, and you look at what's driving it and everything else, it's just not. And the vibe is so different from how it was. The mortgage market is not supportive of things going nuts in the same way it did back then. It'll be interesting to see if the feelings of lenders are going to change as we get into sort of the proper boom phase. Because if you're going to have people really speculating, you kind of need some of the mortgage products and the lax criteria, shall we say, that you saw last time around. Will we get that again? I don't know. But normally there's always rules that were brought in for a very good reason tend to get forgotten exactly when you need them.
Yeah, you're right. And I think another thing that people are forgetting is inflation. The property market is growing, and it is growing a little bit beyond inflation. But it's not left it behind miles and miles and miles. It depends on what figure you believe with inflation, but it's over 5%. It is. And depends on what you're buying. It's probably closer to double digits. So if that's the case and property is going up by 10%, yes, on average, it probably is outperforming inflation, but not dramatically so. So inflation is driving a lot of this as well. And people are seeming to forget that.
Okay.
The next one is from Anon. I don't think that's their name. I don't think they've left their name. What's the most challenging part of running your business or property portfolio? So there's two parts to that, Rob. Do you want to tackle property first, your property portfolio?
Okay, do property first. No, there's no particularly challenging thing, but something that I've noticed is that there are periods when everything happens all at once. And this is something that even happened when I didn't have that much big of a portfolio. It was always the case. Even if I had two properties, something would happen at both of them at the same time, and then nothing would happen for a couple of months. And as time's gone on, that just has been exaggerated. I don't know why, but you just get weeks when everything happens all at once. And so if you are self-managing, or even if you're using agents and you've got multiple agents coming to you for things, it can be pretty stressful. But then there's other long stretches of time where you can basically forget you've owned it. And it just seems to be one of those weird kind of rules of life that's the way it goes. I don't know why.
I'm pretty good at blocking out the things that go wrong. I mean, it's only 2 weeks ago that one of my properties got raided by the police. I wasn't in the property and it had nothing to do with me. It was to do with the tenant. But I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, we need to deal with that. But it was fine. Might not shock you. But maybe some people listening might be thrown by it, but it's the admin for me.
No, really?
Oh,
you love
God.
a good form.
Oh, God. The forms, mortgages, we love leverage. And, we talk about the power of leverage all the time. But, oh, my God, I nearly want to do it without mortgages because of the paperwork. And it's okay when you have one property. And, I understand these are very privileged problems to have when you have to fill out more than one mortgage form. But it's still painful. I'm still allowed to hate it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are. I mean, you're not going to get a lot of sympathy,
No.
but you're allowed to hate it if you want. There is a lot of admin involved. And I think that's something else that's important for people to realise. You can never be as hands-off as a property investor if you start going down the buy-to-let route as you would if you had shares. So if you invest in the stock market or if you had shares in a REIT, so you had exposure to property, but not through buy-to-let, you can be completely hands-off. You couldn't be hands-on if you wanted to. They wouldn't be very interested in your opinion. But when you're doing buy-to-let, there's always going to be something And even if you've got a great agent, they're going to need to come to you for the odd thing. If you're going to have mortgages, then you'll need to do things there. You'll need to talk to your accountant. There's always going to be something. And as your portfolio grows, it means that those are going to be coming around more often, even if it's only the occasional thing, because it's the occasional thing per property, but then you've got more property. So it's something to be aware of. I think you need to go into this knowing that you can't just have this as a purely financial set and forget type investment, because things do happen. And I don't think any particular aspect of it is that challenging. It could be if you got like emotionally involved in it, and it's good that you're not, and then you can just kind of go, oh yeah, police raid, fine. And that's quite a healthy attitude to have, because there's no point getting stressed out about it, but some people would. But if you can just be kind of emotionally detached, then it is just the stuff that needs dealing with.
I appreciate that. I'm a little bit different with like stresses and challenges to most people, and most people would be thrown by that. So it's easy to say, like, well, don't be stressed by it. Most people are either wired by it or not, but try and quickly become aware that you're stressed by it and find perspective. Okay, it's bad, but the situation that the raiding for is worse. You've kind of got the after effects of it, but it'll get sorted. And that's why you make your rental profit, to pay for the bits that go wrong. And so it's kind of just accept that that's part of life, and things go wrong and things go right, and you kind of just have to ride with it. I know it sounds very like hippie-ish and just go with it, man. But it's just like, it is like, you can either, the situation's happened, decide to feel awful about it, or decide not to be bothered. It's up to you. It's not, there are a lot worse things that can go on in life, and just put it in perspective.
I love the fact we speak to each other basically every day, normally multiple times a day, and that just never came up. I didn't know about it until you mentioned it just now. It kind of shows
it's
how
crazy. Okay, so let's business. Hardest part of business. There's a list. But to deflect and give me more time, and maybe not make my answer sound so bad, what's yours?
I think I know what your answer would be, and it's going to be the same for me. It's people.
People.
The most important thing in our business is the people. It's a service business, so the people is everything. We absolutely couldn't do it on our own. We've tried to do things on our own in the past. It hasn't gone very well. It's awesome, but when you've got a team of a certain size, there's always something going on. And I find that far more stressful than anything else. You can have money concerns in business, and that can be stressful. But I find emotional people problems so much more stressful than that. Even if it's kind of something that's solved and it's forgotten about a few days later, I find it very stressful at the time. And I know you're the same.
Yeah, you answered it for me. I just wanted you to say it. So I agree with everything you just said. And I think it's because, I think it's important to point out that you also get the most happiness from the people as well. The fact that, someone in the team is really like a cool person, wherever you're like, yes, awesome, this makes, they're a fun person to have in the office or what have you, like, great, I'm so glad they're here. It's when things go wrong, you're either like, it's the wrong person in the business and you're like, oh, gosh, I've made a mistake. You might use different language to that. Or, they're going through some troubles and it's like, oh, I feel for them. Like, that's not cool either. So, yeah, it's definitely the part that brings the most stress. The rest, like, oh, this has happened, that's happened. It's like, oh, it's whatever. But, the world is about people, isn't it? And you're like, a spreadsheet might not have as many numbers in as you'd like, or something goes wrong, but who cares? But, like, people, that's kind of what the world's made up of. All right, next one.
This one comes in from Andy, who says, are your mortgages paid off? Are they, Rob?
Very personal question, Andy. No, and partly deliberately so. So my mortgage is paid off enough that I can access good rates. I'm talking about my own home here. I don't know if it's buy-to-let. I can answer buy-to-let separately in a minute. But on my own home, it's got enough equity off it that I can access the best rates. But borrowing is so cheap right now, in my mind, from an investment decision, it'd be crazy to even want or desire to pay it off because interest rates are so low. So if I'm paying, I don't know my exact rate, but let's just say it's 2% on my mortgage. If I'm paying 2% on my mortgage, can I use that money elsewhere to get more than a 2% return? Well, at the moment, it's not hard, is it? So, of course, I'd rather put my money elsewhere. So if I had, let's just say, £10,000 left of my mortgage. Unfortunately, it's a little more than that. But let's just say I did. Do I want to pay that £10,000 off so I feel good that I've got no mortgage? Or do I want to invest that £10,000 and maybe get 5%, 7% return instead? Well, then it's a numbers game and it's not an emotional decision. But I can understand that people emotionally because you're taught it all the time. Pay your mortgage off, pay your mortgage off, pay your mortgage off, want to pay the mortgage off. But actually, is it the most savvy thing you can do from a financial point of view? Probably not.
No, I've gone so far the other way now that I don't have a home mortgage because I rent, but I actually looked into buying a home to live in because I wanted the mortgage, because the debt is so cheap and it's like being inflated away faster than you're paying interest on it. But as a financial decision, I'd want to get the biggest mortgage I could at the moment and just lock it in, and that'd be awesome. It turned out for lifestyle reasons, I just couldn't justify it. I actually don't want to own, but it's like, I was quite tempted just for that reason. And it's the same on the buy-to-let portfolio. I don't know what my loan to value is. I don't deliberately max it out. I don't keep pulling out equity every chance I get. But it would seem crazy to pay it off at the moment when rates are so cheap. It's literally free money in many cases because inflation is whatever we said it was and your interest rate's sub 2%. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. So even with the admin, that's why we talked about that. But other than the admin, you would just do it every time without fail. So let's do our next question. And it's in from Matt, and came in via Facebook. So the stats tell us the average house price has gone up about 10%, or about 30k on average, although people have spent about 10k on renovations. In other words, are we better off buying a completely new house instead? Or the stats that shows that a homeowner has spent on a house, and how much has it risen by because they spent the money on the house? So basically, is everything gone up because everyone's been renovating their homes? I think that's part of the question. And even if that was true, which we'll quickly get to, isn't. Even if that's true, I think moving house, I think people forget that beyond the stress, there's actually a lot of cost involved. And this is one of my big bugbears, is the cost of moving home. So I think it really clogs up the market because more people would probably move home if there weren't so many costs associated with it, particularly tax. But moving to a sideways move to a new home, unless you've got more money and you're moving to a bigger property, if you're looking to buy another property but just a newer version of it, or just another property, it's not efficient to do. The only time really it's efficient to move house, and obviously sometimes there can be emotional reasons to move house, so I'm talking from a finance point of view, the only reason it's efficient is if you're going up or down, because you're moving up the ladder or down the ladder. But moving across the ladder, it just actually ends up costing you money, and in a way you probably take one step back because of all the costs involved. Yeah,
which is bad for mobility, which is bad for productivity. If you lived in not even like one city, but like one part of London, say, and there is a job on the other side of London, if you want to move from a 3-bed of a certain size to another 3-bed of that size elsewhere in London, the stamp duty is going to be a fortune. So you're not going to make that move. You're just not going to do it.
To move house in London, stamp duty is a 6-figure number for most parts of London. That's a crazy amount of money. So no wonder everyone's doing renovations. It's because they can't afford to move house.
No, so I think that's the answer. Like, why has the market gone up? Is it because people have been renovating? No, it's because the market has gone up. It's been lifted by various factors, but it's not that everyone suddenly got very handy. A lot of people have. It's very hard to get a builder because everyone's very busy sort of doing extensions, but that's the people who are not moving, and those are not being used as comps to justify other prices elsewhere. It's just a different thing. So lots of people are doing work on their homes because they can't move because there's no stock, or they don't want to move because of stamp duty or whatever. I'm with you on the stamp duty. Tax is such a weird thing because in so many cases, tax is used as to disincentivize things. So there's a reason that there's tax on cigarettes and alcohol and things like that. But then you also tax people's wages, which is weird, and you tax them moving house when you don't want to add friction to that market. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And that is the reason why I don't think anyone moves as much as they should do, really.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we all stay in our homes a lot longer than possibly we'd all want because of that. And I understand why you rent. It gives you that flexibility. People often in society go, why haven't you bought your own home yet if you're renting? But actually renting brings you a lot of choice and a lot of flexibility. And I think more and more people are opening their eyes to that because moving home is a very expensive business.
It is. And I'd much prefer it if it were easier because the process, we haven't even touched on the process of moving house, of like transacting in property at all, is terrible. It's an absolute nightmare and it's expensive. So no wonder people don't do it.
No. Well, this could turn into a massive rant. So before it does, let's do the next question.
Okay, Chris Jones from Facebook says, the Robs seem to champion single buy-to-let as their favoured property strategy, but I would love to hear their views about HMOs, the pros and the cons.
We champion it because it's our favourite, and probably for most people, not all, for most people it probably is, the best strategy for them, whether you do it via a fund or yourself. But there is a place for HMOs, and there is a place for people doing them because they suit it through their goals and their strategy. So let's start with, why would you do HMO over standard buy-to-let? Let's just assume we all like standard buy-to-let, so we don't need to do a versus thing. So why would people choose a HMO strategy? Let's start with the pros.
So it's just higher yield, right? Are there any others? That's all the obvious.
Well, that's it, really. It's the money. You're going to make a higher rental return, and I think that suits people who are trying to possibly hit a financial goal a little faster than normal, because most of your money in property, most of your wealth, I should say, is created through capital growth. And that's true. It can't be debated. It is. But you can enhance your rental returns by taking the HMO approach. So if you do that, you're, for example, desperate to get out of your work, the type of job you do, maybe you don't like it anymore. I find a lot of pharmacists hate their jobs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I find a lot, and IT contractors as well. A lot of them are like desperate to get out. When I've spoken to them, and they want to exit the world as quickly as they can. So HMO potentially, because there is downsides, potentially could be a great avenue for them because it'll get them to that financial goal a little faster.
Yeah, so I think that is exactly the situation. And especially if you've got a defined amount of money and you want to use that to get out of your job or go part-time or do whatever as soon as you can, that makes sense. So let's just say you could achieve double the yield. I don't think you actually can, but let's just say you could. So if you're making £800 per property instead of 400, you managed to get 3 of them, then I was like, brilliant, that's enough for me. I'm able to quit. Even if you get less capital growth over time because of the location or the type of property, even if it's more hassle, still totally worth it because you've achieved your goal. You had a short-term goal and it's allowed you to achieve that short-term goal. If you are investing for the long term and you are looking at this kind of concept of total return where it's your rental income and your capital growth, then you're making less per month, but potentially you're saving a lot of time, which you need to put a value on, and you're going to get greater capital growth over time because HMOs tend to be the type of property in the type of location that's not going to be first in line. Unlike where we are today, this would not work as an HMO.
No, I mean, it'd be one hell of a HMO, but no, it's not going to work.
But it's probably going to do pretty well for capital growth compared to somewhere on the outskirts that's a little bit less fancy, let's say. So I think that it has its place for that reason, but it does completely depend on your goal. I think the downsides are pretty obvious. I mean, it is mainly the hassle factor. If you've got multiple rooms and let's say you've got 5 rooms and the average tenancy term is like 6 months because things tend to be a bit more transient, then it means you're basically always dealing with a change of tenancy, which is work and cost if you're using an agency because they'll charge you a letting fee every time. So I think that's a kind of a fairly obvious drawback. And that ties into, I think, where people get HMOs wrong in that they go into it looking at the headline rate of what you could achieve, not realising that actually by the time you deduct all the different costs that you've got that you don't have with normal buy-to-let, is it a higher yield? Yeah, probably, but how much higher? And is it higher enough to make it worthwhile?
Yeah, there's a big one for me, and people overlook this in whatever they do with whatever strategy and property they take, but you do have to value your time, and you will, depending on your strategy, allocate so much time towards it. Even with standard buy-to-let, as we talked about, it's like taking the calls from the letting agent because someone's raided your property, or dealing with the paperwork. But if you think that's a lot, well, HMOs is a whole different world because in that property, instead of having one tenant to deal with, you've now got 4, 5, 6. That's 4, 5, 6 different personalities. One of them leaves, you've got a void. So suddenly you've got to find someone else to bring in. You've got more maintenance issues. Yes, it's a great strategy for some people, but it's clear, why it isn't right for us as individuals, and clear why it isn't right for most other people. A lot of people see the shiny end product of, extra income, but either don't think through what they're going to have to do to get there, or just block it out and go, I'm focused on this end goal and I'll just conveniently forget all these other things I'm going to have to accept. Now, if you go into it with eyes wide open and you're happy to do that, then fantastic. But just make sure you are going in eyes wide open. Cool, right.
Have we got another one?
So this one's from David on Instagram. How do you think an investor can differentiate themselves from the competition in all aspects?
Interesting one. So let's start by listing out some aspects. Why do you need to differentiate yourself as a starting point? So you put your property up on Rightmove or whatever. What's the purpose of differentiating yourself is so get it let faster to a better quality of tenant at a higher rent. So you need to give them the motivation to do those things. So that kind of leads you into ways of differentiating. I think one is is visual. That's probably the most important because the standard is pretty low. And if you could make your own property stand out more, so the phone rings more times, you get more viewings, that's naturally going to translate into more choice for you in terms of tenant and be supportive of a higher rent. So I think that is a good opportunity for differentiating yourself without actually spending much more or putting in that much more effort. And then the other one that comes to mind is once you've got that tenant in there, keeping hold of them. Because contrary to what the media would have you to believe sometimes, landlords don't want to kick their tenants out every 6 months for no reason. They want them to stay because it's more profitable and it's easier. So to keep them there, you can differentiate on service. And again, I don't think that means you have to do anything particularly crazy because the standard of service is normally really bad. So if you can just be responsive and pleasant and easy to deal with and fix things quickly, that is enough to make you stand out. And that therefore accomplished sort of getting someone in faster at a higher rent who's less likely to cause you trouble and will stay there for the long term. So that's two kind of very quick, easy bits of differentiation that have real results.
I like what you've done there. And you've kind of focused on the owning part. So I suppose the other two parts are when you're starting out and then, actually finding that property that you're after. For the starting out, I think it's most people just stumble into property investment or attempt to stumble in or kind of do the minimum needed. And the fact that David's interacting with our socials and hopefully is watching this, hi if you are, means that he's probably going to be fine and he already is standing out because he's putting that effort in, he's curious to learn. And for me, people who, I'm biased, but I'm sure everyone who's listening and watching will want to hear this. I think people who put the time and effort in to learn and educate themselves and come up with a better strategy are probably going to outperform all other investors because you're showing that you're in the minority, you're the ones who are willing to go to that extra level. And then with sourcing deals, I think it's just effort again, like picking the best investments, whether it's finding a really good company or individual sourcer to work with to find those deals or putting the effort in yourself that others aren't willing to do. Other people want to just trawl Rightmove, make a call, possibly do a viewing and put an offer in. But are you willing to meet sourcing companies or individual sources, vet them, pick the one that you feel is the best, or look at areas that other people aren't picking up on or watching the videos of best places to invest, things like that. Just going, okay, what does everyone else do? What are one or two things extra that I could do that's just going to take me to that next level? You are then in the minority, and that's where you want to be because you're ahead of the competition.
Okay, should we move on?
Let's do it.
This one comes in from Rebecca. This is a really interesting question. It says, have you got an end goal? For example, when I hit 1 million in assets, I'll stop investing. Do you have an end goal?
For property investment, which is obviously what it's aimed at, yes, which I know it's going to sound weird being hesitant because we talk about goals all the time. And I had a goal early on and I'm pleased to say I hit that goal. But for me now, it's about investing in assets when I have any surplus of cash and reinvest a lot of money into the business. So that's not as frequent as I'd like. But I'd say it's just doing that now to make sure that my goal, I guess, now is about making sure my money works as hard as possible for me when I choose to invest it. So I suppose the answer to the question is I hit my original goal, which I'm very lucky to do. And it wasn't to dramatically change my lifestyle. It was more of a financial stability goal and the nest egg and the protection if anything went wrong in the future, and then that'll transition into a legacy play in the future as well. But for now, it's just about making sure that when I choose to invest, it's making any money that I have work as hard as possible.
I wish I had something more different to say because mine's going to be quite similar. But I think it's the same. It's like I had a goal that was meaningful for me, achieved it, and now I kind of don't. And I think that's all right because both of us have got goals for other areas of life, primarily business. So I think it's dangerous to not have any kind of goal because it means you're not motivated to do the work that's needed, and you could end up going too far. I've said this on the podcast before. It sounds weird, but it's true. Like, I literally know someone who ended up owning 200 properties because he didn't know when to stop. Like, it was just what he did.
That's a good addictive personality.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
like when it's like I just eat loads of chocolate. Like that's really good.
Yeah, but would you really want to own 200 properties?
No.
Like, and I don't think he did. And he was like he just sort of like woke up one day and he did. You know, this was more than 10 years ago when it was easier to do that. It's a lot more challenging to do that now. So you're not going to stumble into owning a small village, but it is weird. By not having a goal, you could either not go far enough or you can go too far because you don't know where to stop. And I think when it comes to money, obviously being in a position where you end up doing too much is a great position to be in, because it's a lucky position to have too much. But you do get people who are worth hundreds of millions or even billions who just keep on working kind of too hard because they don't have a goal, they don't know when to stop. And so I think basically what I'm saying is having a goal is important. So the fact that we don't have a specific property goal doesn't mean that we're not practicing what we're preaching. It's just that our focus is elsewhere at the moment.
Okay, cool. Let's see if we disagree on the answers on the next one. So this is from By Night on Instagram. I'm curious to know why you don't recommend Birmingham as one of the best places to invest in. The city is going through enormous infrastructure developments and the house prices are relatively good. Why don't you like Birmingham, Rob?
It's just a horrible place. No, I'm joking. It's not. Oh, no,
That is not getting edited out.
It's going to happen again. I've offended yet another major city.
There's a million people you just offended.
Yeah, I am joking. Well, it's the reason we didn't mention it is the same reason that we didn't mention about 50 other places. So we did a webinar about our best places to invest this year. And like always happens, the comments is just full of, what about this place? What about that place? I've got nothing against any of them, but we've just picked out certain locations based on that we think are particularly strong, or where there's an interesting angle on it or something like that. If we mentioned every possible place that you could make a good investment in the country, it would go on forever and not be very helpful. So from my side at least, we didn't exclude Birmingham because there's anything wrong with it. There's not. It can be a great place to invest. But it just wasn't on our list because there was only 4 or 5 places on it.
Yeah, but it was very close to being because... Yeah. You're right, Knight. It does have incredible infrastructure projects. You know, there's a million people who live there for a reason. It's, got so much going for it. HS2 is still going there. There's loads and loads of good news around Birmingham, and I'm a huge fan. And our business Property Hub Invest is actively trying to source property there amongst all the other places we've mentioned as well, because we do rate it so highly. So we haven't got a anti-Birmingham thing going on. It just didn't make that top 4 or 5. But it would definitely make our top 10. So that's cool. Top 10's still good.
Top 10's fine.
Yeah. All right, Rob. So how's the first video podcast been?
I would do another one.
Oh, that's nice.
But only if we can do it here again.
Yeah, that's it. Well, if you are still listening to this, have not viewed this yet, then please go and check out YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Honestly, it'll be the best click you've done all year, because it will then open you up to seeing all the other stuff that we've got planned. And make sure you stick around to the very end, because we'll give you a little bit more of a tour. There's going to be a little bit more to watch and enjoy. And we hope that we can bring you more content like this very soon, because to be honest, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Really has. But yeah, we need to stop now because I need to go off and take more pictures of the view. But we will be back with the podcast again next Thursday. We will be back in our spare bedrooms, unfortunately, but the podcast will go on, and I'm sure we're going to have a great episode as well.
Although I might take some of this furniture with me. Yeah. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.